Hello again. In our last session, we did a simple AJAX call to fetch the data from country's API. We have created a function called getCountryData and we called it multiple times. Means we made three AJAX calls parallelly and we didn't have control over which data has to load first and which data has to load next. Like see here, if you go and refresh, you can see that America, Sweden, Denmark, and if you refresh again, sometimes you can see that USA, Denmark, Sweden. The order of the data is changing because we made three parallel calls and we didn't have the control. Same thing we can see in the console, like if you refresh it once again, now see Sweden has come first and Denmark, then USA. So we didn't have control over the loading of the data. So now let us see how to make the calls in sequence. Like first load the data of USA, then load other country like that. So go to app.js and here we have get country data. So I just use only USA here. Now if you go and see here, we have the object and the USA is having the borders and it is having two countries, Canada and Mexico. We can see that here CAN is code for Canada and MEX is code for Mexico. I would like to load the USA country first, then neighbors. So we have this code. So let's make it like load country. And here, what we need to do, we need to first load the USA. After that, you have the borders array. From the borders array, we need to take this one of the value like borders codes Canada and Mexico. Then by passing this code, we should load this country. So border country, we need to load it. So how to do that? So here we are loading the country data by passing the country name. I just name it country Ajax call, and after that what we are doing here, if we see in the callback function we are forming the HTML and adding to the containers element. So what I do, I just separate this forming HTML into another function. Let's say function render country. Here we are using the data, so we have to pass it as a input parameter. So data, and so here we need to make this call render country of data. We need to pass, save it. Get country data. I just use only USA and remove other. Now let's go and see on the UI. Now you can see that USA is there. It's working as expected. So once we get the country data, we need to get the borders. So console log it, console.log data. We can see that borders are available inside the country and the borders is array which is having two values here, Canada and Mexico. So here we just store these borders in one variable constant border equal to data dot borders. Here we have two values, but I would like to render only one country data, which is the first one. So in order to get the first one, we can just restructure this array borders array by using like this syntax. Now the border will have the value Canada. Now we need to write a code to load the data of border country. So load border country. And remember one thing, we are doing inside the callback function of the country's Ajax call. So we are inside this load event callback function. because once the data loaded, the data will be available in the load callback function only, and then only we can get the data of the borders. So here what we need to do, we need to again make another call. So just copy this and paste it here. Here request to 2, and so here you are getting error because we need to close it again. Yes, save it and just format document. Yeah, so our borders callback function is ended here, and countries callback function is ended here. So now it is clear, and we can see that we are making another request to load the border country data. So request 2, and we are opening the connection and URL. Here we need to pass the border ID instead of the country. So border, and here instead of data I use another variable, maybe border country, and let us check how the response will be. Then we'll assign, take the border country, copy it, paste it, and paste it, and here it is not required, remove this. Here we are using the country code instead of the country name, so we need to use another URL. So let's go to GitHub API, REST countries. Here you can see that endpoints, name endpoint, just we now we used it, and this is the endpoint we used. So now we need to use the endpoint code because we are going to pass the code instead of the name. So here only change is alpha. Copy it and paste it here. Instead of border country, let us print this response text and let us see how it appears. There you go. You can see that Canada is loaded, and you can see here the first one is okay, this is the data, and the second one is just object. So it is not array of object. That's why we don't need to do any, destructuring anything, because it is just a object when you pass the country code, because when you pass the country code you can directly get the country, and when you pass the country name you get all the details like country, borders, everything. Now if you observe, so first we made a call to countries API, and there we got the data. From countries data we got the border countries codes, and using border countries codes we made another ajax call. Then we loaded the border country details. So which means the border country details is always depends on the country details. So this has to be go on sequence, because we can't do these calls parallelly without knowing the border country codes, because the border country codes are part of the country data. So this is how we can make the calls in sequence. And if you observe here, we have the border countries callback function inside the countries callback function. So you can see here inside the countries callback function, we are having again one more callback function for the borders country code. So let's think if the border country again having again the borders, and if you would like to load them again, what you need to do, you need to make another ajax call, and inside the border countries callback function, which means you need to add another callback function inside this borders callback function. So which is nothing but we are making nested callback functions. And let's say if you want to load 10 countries data, then you need 10 callback functions. And whenever you are adding the callback functions like this, we are going to make our code messy. So whenever our code is messy and not able to maintain, then it is hard to understand. So after some time, if you have some changes to make to any one of the callback function, that may affect another code also. To avoid this, we have the concept called promises, which was introduced in ESCX. And here you see that we loaded the country data and neighbor country data, and not just USA, and just pass say Sweden, save it, you can see Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Germany. So like this, we can load any kind of data. This way of having the nested callback functions is called callback hell. So to get rid of the callback hell, we have the promises which were introduced in the ES6. In our next session, we will see what are promises and how to avoid these nested callbacks or callback.